we know you're listening. It is safe here. It's fair. Come inside.
This footage was found in a ranger's locker months after the shifts stopped reporting back. 8 seconds of shadow in a clearing and a voice on a radio that didn't belong to anyone on the roster. It is the clip that changed how several rangers walked the trails. Remember that opening frame? We will come back to it by Story 4. For decades, park rangers have been the quiet guardians of remote spaces. They know how the woods sound at midnight, which hollows hide owls and which hide nothing at all. They know where the ground gives, where the moss hides old bones, and when a rustle is natural and when it is not. The encounters you're about to hear were recorded by professionals, by people who spend more nights under a tent than most of us spend awake. None of these stories uses names. None includes graphic detail. What matters is what was recorded, and what the rangers refused to explain. Story 1. The hiker who vanished. In late summer, a solo hill walker set off on a day route through a basin of firs in the northern Cascades. He checked in at the trailhead. He posted a short clip to social, and then the trail swallowed the feed. When he failed to report back that evening, a local park crew launched a search at first light 3 rangers, 2 on foot with radios, 1 coordinating from the access road. They found his pack beside a narrow stream, zipped, water bottle half empty, headlamp tucked beneath a stump. Everything seemed in order until they noticed the ring of shallow grooves pressed into the moss around the rock, concentric and deliberate, not the random trample of wildlife, but a pattern someone had taken time to create. A trail cam nearby captured his last recorded steps. The footage shows him walking, then pausing, as if listening. He turns toward a tree line the camera never fully resolves. He steps forward and vanishes from the frame as if a thin curtain closed. The rangers found the moss smoothed in a circular pattern, and the pack's zipper was slightly open where his keys should have been. Search teams followed scent dogs and thermal readings through the night. A heat signature appeared on a ridge a mile away and then disappeared by the time the team crested it. The only recording recovered from that period was the trail cam and a low-quality body cam left near the empty pack. Story 2. The impossible scratches. In a national forest in the Appalachians, a veteran ranger noticed something odd while clearing a switchback after a storm. A set of parallel abrasions on a fallen boulder, cleaned down through moss to bare stone. They were too long for a raccoon, too precise for a bear claw. He photographed them and took rubbings. The marks resembled a pattern an old climber's manual described as intentional scraping, used historically to mark routes, but this marker looped and crossed in a way that made no practical route sense. It was meant to be seen, not used. The ranger set up temporary night cameras and motion sensors. For 2 nights, there was nothing. On the 3rd, the infrared camera recorded a low, elongated shadow moving across the clearing. At normal speed, the clip looks slow and indistinct. Played frame by frame, the shadow doesn't quite meet the grass. At the precise meter where you expect contact, the blades of grass bend away as if repelled. Later soil checks around the grooves turned up micro-fragments of a synthetic thread used in heavy-duty climbing gloves, thread that matched nothing in local lost and found reports. When technicians analyzed the sequence in slow motion, another strange detail emerged. The shadow's gait had 2-step sets that matched the spacing of the grooves. It wasn't walking in a human pattern. It was stepping in the same cadence as the lines on the stone. The impression was intentional. Someone or something seemed to be marking a map across the landscape, leaving a trail of symbols only visible if you knew to look. The ranger team tried to follow the pattern deeper into the woods. The path ended abruptly at a ravine where the moss showed more of the same pressed patterns. And then nothing. The scratch marks started to look less like vandalism and more like punctuation. Story 3. The Voice That Copied. In a well-managed national park, volunteers installing marker flags reported hearing their own names called at dusk. They radioed the ranger on duty, who set perimeter microphones and left a body cam attached to a tree. That night, the mics recorded a voice speaking low and human. It said simple phrases first, "Over here," and "Hold tight." Then, chillingly, it imitated the ranger's pager call, "Unit 3, respond." The voice used the same cadence and a near-perfect timbre of the volunteer's own voice. Audio specialists later isolated harmonic overlays that did not match typical human vocal production. The mimicry contained frequency bands that suggested a mechanical resonance layered beneath the human sound. Then it learned. Each time the rangers introduced a new code word, the voice repeated it the next night, slightly warped, as if trying on phonemes. The mimicry escalated from single words to short instructions. It began to mimic breathing patterns and radio static, producing a near-perfect simulation that could, at a glance or a moment of panic, pull attention where it shouldn't. On one occasion, the voice called out a volunteer who had not been near the location that week. That volunteer later confirmed he never made the trip. Teams that answered such calls reported subtle manipulations of the scene when they returned. Compasses rotated, small stones repositioned, a pair of gloves left on a stump facing inward. The mimicry used familiarity as a lure. The researchers feared it was teaching itself how people move and react, and using that knowledge to guide them if someone or something knows your voice and how you respond. All the safety rules begin to feel conditional. Story 4. The Still Figure on Camera. Trail cameras in the Pacific Northwest, set to monitor elk activity, caught a frame technicians almost dismissed as a sensor fault. The timestamp read 2:17 a.m. The image showed a clearing, and at the tree line, an upright dark form. In consecutive frames over nearly 8 minutes, the form does not move. The wind stirs the branches. A fox darts across the moss. The figure remains a column. When rangers visited the spot at midnight, the air felt different there, a pressure described as similar to stepping from open air into a sealed room. They found 3 small objects arranged in a line: a tarnished key, a smooth plastic peg, and a scrap of industrial blue thread. The key's pitting suggested long exposure to moisture. The peg had no markings. The blue thread matched fragments found at the scratch site in the Appalachians. Someone, or something, had placed tokens. Analysts compared the posture from that 8-minute frame to the opening 8-second clip we started with. The head tilt, the slight lean, the patient waiting, these shared a signature. The pause is not empty. It is attention. Investigators tested audio on the nearby ridge, played a series of recorded phrases and code words. The mimicry responded from a different location. On one playback of a made-up phrase, speakers recorded a faint echo repeating it several minutes later from the opposite slope. The pattern suggested active listening and a distributed awareness across the terrain. That signature is the clue. The form waits and listens. It does not dart or attack. It catalogs. In the raw recordings, the subtle differences between human and mimic responses are visible. The mimic inserts a fractional lag, a harmonic shimmer that reveals approximation rather than origin. That difference is the proof that whatever records us is learning to speak our language slowly and deliberately. Story 5. Objects Left Where Nothing Belongs. In a southwestern park, cans meant to mark water runs were altered. On one seldom-used ridge, a ranger found a can topped with a rusted tin. Inside was a single sentence on a scrap. "We remember." The handwriting matched none of the volunteers. Nearby trail cams showed a figure walking into frame at 2:43 a.m., crouching, placing the tin, then backing away. The figure's movements were deliberate, careful, almost ritualized. Inside the tin were fragments, a sliver of blue fabric, a tiny polished stone with a groove cut across it, and a shard of a modern polymer. Lab tests revealed the blue thread had trace amounts of an industrial dye used in technical outerwear. The stone's groove had been scored by a fine tool. These items were not trash. They were tokens, deliberately selected, cleaned, and placed according to pattern. Across parks, similar tokens appeared: paired pebbles, triangular pin clusters, and occasional single-line notes. Rangers cataloged motifs and began to suspect a language. The objects were left where people would find them, like messages nailed to posts of weathered wood and lichen taken together. These 5 encounters form a pattern: attention that waits, mimicry that learns, markers left where people will find them, and scratches that map a cadence. The opening 8-second clip we promised to return to shares the same lean and listening posture as the still figure in Story 4. That is the promised payoff. Where many expect a violent reveal, the record shows repeated acts of observation, response, and then a token left behind. What might that mean? The most persuasive interpretation from the combined evidence is that whatever is being recorded is less a hunter and more an archivist, an entity or group that records human presence, tests reactions, and leaves small tokens as a kind of index. The mimicry teaches it to speak our sounds. The scratches encode a path. The tokens mark sites of attention. None of this is benign. Deliberate behavior implies planning, adaptation, and an ability to hide intent behind normal landscapes. If the opening frame still pulls at you, that's by design. The slight shoulder tilt and head cock are a pattern. Specialists now advise rangers to treat those postures as markers of watching rather than immediate threat. If you found yourself pausing the video to recheck that lean, you just performed the same act the watchers wanted: attention. That tiny reflex, repeated across dozens of recordings, is the thread connecting the cases. Which of these 5 encounters would you avoid? Tell us in the comments which one you would never walk toward and why. We'll publish a follow-up next week that dives deeper into the audio evidence behind the mimicry and the laboratory results from the tokens. If you want more videos like this, subscribe and keep your eyes on the trails.